Welcome into Carps Corner, and NFL draft just concluded this weekend, the 2022 edition. And man, it was a pretty good one. A lot of exciting stuff happened overall, but wanted to dive in quickly, in a brief little show here about, the Buckeyes and how they turned out. There were 6 Ohio State players drafted, but obviously first round Thursday, second, third Friday, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th on Saturday. And it was a pretty good draft. It was entertaining. I thought the NFL did a good job. They moved that thing along pretty well. And it was compelling as always. Thursday was wildly entertaining, and Friday, they did a pretty good job. And I know interest kind of wanes, throughout the draft and throughout the process, just given the fact that it's so long, gets a little arduous, and people just want to see the high points. So for all the Buckeye fans out there, I figured I'd put something together for them, just focusing on the 6 players that were drafted, and then a couple free agents as well, and what their future is going to be like. Some high-level notes about the draft. First of all, 4 schools had multiple players taken in the first round. Usual suspects: Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan. So 2 big boys from the north, 2 big boys from the south. Ohio State having 2, Michigan having 2, Georgia and Bama having a slew of guys taken there in the first round. I said 6 players were taken by Ohio State. That is the lowest number in a draft for Ohio State since 2015, when they had 5 players taken. And if you remember that 2015 year, that was coming off the 2014 national championship, but that team was heavily loaded down with a lot of sophomores and juniors who contributed a ton, a lot of third-year players and some second-year players who either A, came out early in 2015, or B, ultimately stayed 4 years. And that's why there was the massive haul then in 2015 with, I believe, a bevy of 5 first-rounders, then Michael Thomas going high in the second. So it was a little bit disappointing from that standpoint. I was hoping that there might be, goodness, when you look at this, probably 8 guys drafted. Thought you might have been able to sneak in a 9th, but unfortunately, it's only 6. 2 in the first round, 2 in the third round, 1 in the 5th, and then ultimately 1 in the 7th. So kind of clustered there a little bit at the top end, back end of day 2, and then a little bit spread out through the third day as well. Georgia setting a new draft record with 15 selections, which was unprecedented. I think LSU tied Ohio State. The 2004 Ohio State draft had 14 players, and there was a similar situation to the draft with Ohio State in 2016. Ohio State won the national championship in 2002. Not a ton of seniors, but they were very important in the 03 draft. So those guys left, not a lot. A lot of guys came back for a 4th year, and a lot of sophomores that played. And then you had that massive haul then with 14 players in 2004. Very similar, like I said, to that 2014 team. A lot of second, third year players, not many drafted in 2015 with 5. And then in 2016, obviously a massive haul again. So that's kind of how this cyclically works. But Ohio State at one point had tied it was right there in second still with the number of first rounders in a given year with 5. And then they had the record, or were tied with the record, for most players taken in a single draft with 14. Georgia now breaking that record. So Buckeye Nation, probably a little sad. It's tough. I mean, it's an anomaly to get that. You have to have a great team with a lot of people pairing up, and some guys deciding to leave early, and then ultimately as well, just guys being really good. And when you win a national championship, people are more apt to take flyers on guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, just because they believe they have that winning pedigree. And that's something that is important to NFL clubs. And so Georgia winning the national championship, no surprise that they ultimately broke the record, with Georgia having 15 players taken, breaking a record, I think, with LSU and Ohio State previously having 14. So a little bit of news right there as well. And so let's dive into the picks. We're going to take a look at, each player, where they were drafted, in the scenario that they're going to kind of be facing. So first player off the board, Garrett Wilson, 10th pick, second first round pick of the New York Jets. He's going to in a pretty good situation. They've got Corey Davis on the other side. They brought him in from Tennessee, the wide receiver there. He's a first round pick out of Western Michigan. Brought him in last year from Tennessee. So they were looking for someone on the opposite side to help give Zach Wilson, their young quarterback, another weapon. So Garrett Wilson checks that box. All right. They've got Robert Saleh as their head coach. He's a defensive guy. But if you look at their coordinator is Mike LaFleur. So that name might sound familiar to you. Why does it sound familiar? Well, LaFleur is kind of a unique name, and outside of dodgeball with Peter LaFleur, I hadn't really heard it much in the sporting realm until along came Matt LaFleur, the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans, who ultimately then became the head coach of the Green Bay Packers and has done a great job since he's been there in 3 years, I think winning 13 games each season. He's been the head coach under the Kyle Shanahan tree. So should feel pretty good. He's very adept at receivers, quarterback coaching, understands offense. If you look at what Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur have been able to do, and a lot of guys in their coaching tree, Sean McVay, all those guys are kind of tied together. They've had a lot of success. So I'm really excited to kind of see how this offense will shake out. He knows how to move weapons around. And he learned that from Kyle Shanahan. If you look what they did with Deebo Samuel, backfield, slot, outside. Garrett Wilson has a very unique skill set. I don't think he's a guy you want to hand the ball off to in the backfield, but you can get him involved in some jet sweeps. You can work him in the slot. He's really good run after the catch in the screen game. He's a strong physical player. And then obviously isolating him and moving him around both underneath, outside, and then ultimately down the field as well. So Garrett Wilson checking that box, being able to do it. And they have Mike LaFleur, their offensive coordinator, who, still growing into his role a little bit, but I think it's a really good fit there. And I like that. I think that that's a good opportunity there for Garrett Wilson to have some success. Second pick for the Ohio State Buckeyes, Chris Alabe coming in for the Saints at 11. Now, I touched on this before. The Saints love drafting Buckeyes. If you look at the guys they have down there, Pete Warner right now, Michael Thomas, they had Ted Ginn, they drafted Von Bell, they brought in James Laurinaitis, a number of years back. I mean, I could just sit here and roll off if I started thinking about the number of guys. Oh, at one point that Eli Apple, Marshawn Lattimore is still down there. I mean, they love Ohio State players. And talking to Jeff Ireland, their pro personnel director, maybe assistant GM now, I'm not sure his title. He's like, guys come in from Ohio State. They're well coached. They're tough. They work hard, and they're good football players. And they're generally pretty good people. It's like, so why wouldn't we want these guys on our team? They're not only going to be productive on the field, but they're not going to be hassles off the field, and they're going to be model citizens for us. And they're going to be tempo setters. So Chris Olave, the Saints trade all the way up from 16 to go get him. So obviously he's a guy that you can see they targeted and they really, really wanted. What's the offensive situation look like? So they have Jameis Winston. He's the unique player to be the only quarterback, to my knowledge, to be a member of the 30-30 club. That's 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. That was his last year as a starter in Tampa Bay before Tom Brady got there. That year he was first or second in touchdowns, passing yards, interceptions, and sacks. So he can air it out. He can put the ball out there and let guys go. So what do they have around him? Obviously, Alvin Kamara in the backfield, pretty good. They've worked to bolster that offensive line to try to help Jameis Winston. But they're going to sling it around a little bit. Michael Thomas on the opposite side, to me, it's perfect because Michael Thomas is very similar type of player, not quite as fast, but bigger to Garrett Wilson. And so Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave had a lot of success because they're a little yin and yang on the field. What they do complements each other really, really well. Michael Thomas, opposite of Chris Olave, will be able to do the same thing. Michael Thomas is a physical possession receiver. He can get over the top on you, but he's not a burner down the field, and he can make those tough contested ball catches. And then on the opposite side, now you have the topper. You have Chris Olave, who does a great job running, the vertical breaking routes, the slants, the posts, the corners, the takeoffs. He can run outs, he can run overs and the crosses and all that stuff too. But these two guys are going to work really well in tandem as long as Jameis Winston is still throwing them the ball. But they're going to air this thing out. The worry is there now you're without Sean Payton. What is this offense ultimately going to look without him? It's going to be in a transition mode. Allen is their head coach. He's a defensive guy. And so this will be interesting to see how this iteration of the Saints offense continues to evolve, minus the guy who kind of was stirring the drink for him and Sean Payton, who was so good for so stinking long. And so I love the offensive weapons. that they have. This should be a pretty good situation for Chris Alabe. And they really want him. And obviously opposite of Michael Thomas. And we'll see how those guys work together. But really, really excited about that. So those are the first 2 first-rounders for Ohio State, 2 first-rounders. Now we're going to move to day 2. 2 more guys coming off the board for the Buckeyes. Got 5-star elite offensive tackle Nicholas Petit Ferreira coming off 69th, 3rd round to the Tennessee Titans. All right. And so that's it's a big deal there because Mike Vrabel's their head coach, obviously Ohio State alum, coached at Ohio State as well. And so he's very familiar with Mickey Marotti. He understands how they coach these guys here, how they train them, what the expectations are. And these are some of the things that I've talked about before where Mike Vrabel can have candid and honest conversations with these guys at Ohio State because they trust him. He trusts them. He knows they're going to be real with him about guys. And so Nicholas Petit Ferreira getting a great opportunity, super athletic guy. And so he's going to be able to go down there and he doesn't have to be a left tackle right away. They'll probably start him on the right side. They have Taylor Lewand, former Michigan left tackle, really good player, very, very talented guy. And they want to run the football, obviously, with Derrick Henry down there. So he'll probably start on the right side. On the right side, they have Dylan Runs, talent, 2nd round pick in 2021 out of North Dakota State. So I anticipate Petit Ferreira and him battling this thing out and seeing if he can get on the field. Worst case, he'll probably be a swing tackle, probably back up both the right and left. He's really smart, very cerebral, athletic. I like this as a scheme fit for him. He's going to have to continue to get bigger. That was always his problem at Ohio State. Super athletic, but has a hard time just continuing to add bulk. And so he's going to have to continue to work on that. And as you get older, as everybody knows, it's always easier to gain weight. So that'll be a good situation and a pretty good fit for him. And I think one of the other areas they could also use him is the extra tackle. Sometimes they'll bring in a 3rd tackle as a tight end. And when you're a team that likes to run the football a lot, I could see them bringing in a guy who's as athletic as Nicholas Petit Ferreira and throwing him in there at that, that extra, they call it 12T, 2 tight ends, but the 1 tight end is a tackle. So that might be something that they could use him for in his rookie year, kind of ease him in to playing. Second player going in the 3rd round, Jeremy Ruckert. This is a great story. New Jersey tight end, comes to Ohio State. Unfortunately, he was banged up and beat up during, pro day, during the combine. So he could never test. And so no one could ever really see how truly fast he was. They couldn't see how gifted he was athletically in these drills by actually putting a time on him. Jeremy Ruckert, I think, might end up being a massive steal. I thought he's a guy that could have possibly went in the 2nd round with how gifted he is athletically and how they developed him as a blocker at Ohio State. There's a lot of things that he's able to do on the football field because they've trained him that way. He's gotten stronger. He's more physical now at the point of attack, but he still has that athleticism. So he went 101 overall, 3rd round to the Jets. Now he's going to be there, and it's nice having a guy that you played with Garrett Wilson going there as their 1st round pick. And so 2 Buckeyes going to the Jets to start this off. Who do the Jets have at tight end? Well, they just brought in CJ Uzama, former Cincinnati Bengal, in free agency. But if you look at it, as I talked before about their coach, Mike LaFleur, their coordinator, under that Kyle Shanahan tree, learning under his brother, LaFleur and Sean McVay, I could see them getting in a lot of 2 tight ends, flexing Ruck around, moving him around a lot as an H-back. You see that a lot up in San Francisco with Shanahan. So that wouldn't surprise me in the least. And so I think if Ruckert's able to digest a lot and learn some multiple positions, it's a very complicated offense. But if he does that, similar to Garrett Wilson, they drafted both of these guys, I believe, for their versatility and their playmaking ability. So it'll be up to them to be able to digest enough of the playbook early on to be able to utilize them in different spots in different formations around the field. So I like this. They've got Robert Saleh as their head coach. He's a defensive guy. So most of it's going to be leaning on Mike LaFleur, their offensive coordinator. And he doesn't necessarily, like I said, Ruck doesn't have to be that inline starting tight end week 1. They have CJ Uzama, and maybe he usurps him and ultimately becomes that guy. But I think they've drafted him for his playmaking ability and the ability to flex him and move him around like an H-back early on with his blocking and his ability to be a very viable receiving threat. So those were the 2 third rounders, 2 offensive guys, lineman, tight end, and they've all been offense thus far. Finally, on day 3, get to the defense a little bit. Tyrique Smith, very physically gifted guy. If you look at him, he's long, he's lean, he's pretty athletic. Unfortunately, at Ohio State, he had some injury issues and never really was able to be as productive as what I think people had hoped for him. But he had all this potential. You see him flash on film, and I guarantee you, guys, scouts look at, darn, you watch this play? This guy's great. Well, then he's a little nicked up, and you have to sit out some plays, miss some time. And so that was a little bit of his MO, but he's a very, very talented player, very, very physically gifted player, going to Seattle, where they, have always put a premium on guys in the way they play their defense, their defensive linemen being able to be physical run stoppers, but also get after the quarterback. They love guys who look like Tyrique Smith. A lot of length, guys who can put on some mass. He can get big. And so there'll be some position, I think, and scheme flexibility for him in there. But he was in the 5th round, 158th to the Seahawks. Looking at their depth chart, they didn't have a ton of pass rush last year. And that's probably why they looked at bringing him in. They also drafted Boye Mafe in the 2nd round from Minnesota. For him to be able to come in. So I could see both of those guys playing, fairly early, and you roll your defensive line a lot. They need this pass rush. Mafe is a big time pass rusher out of Minnesota. And then you look at the other side of it, Tyrique Smith, he's checking every box for what you really want as a defensive end when you look at him physically. Now it's going to be up to him to continue to develop and be able to be productive on the field for the Seattle Seahawks. And then, lastly, final player drafted for the Ohio State Buckeyes in the 7th round, going at the end, I believe 242, to the Las Vegas Raiders, Thayer Munford. And so I know Thayer's probably a little disappointed, probably thought he could be somewhere between a 2nd to 4th round pick. Thayer Munford was a warrior at Ohio State, did everything they asked, switched from tackle to guard, struggled a little bit of guard at times, to be honest, but it's tough doing that, late in your career. And so he did that on the fly this year to help the team to be able to get what they deemed their 4 best offensive linemen outside of center on the field. But Thayer Munford, very, very physically gifted, but does have an injury history. He's had the bad back. And I think when you see guys slide down the draft board, so you think maybe it should have been 3rd round, 4th round pick, and you try to figure out why, a lot of times that's going to be manifested in an injury history and something that he has. And so it's unfortunate for Thayer Munford. They just don't want the risk. But now that he's there, he's in Las Vegas. You look at him, he's a Northeast Ohio guy, a Massillon guy. You got Josh McDaniels there, also a guy from that part of the state. I believe he went to Canton McKinley. So John Carroll grad, if I'm not mistaken. And so there'll be a friendly face. They brought him in, probably surprised he was still there. At 7th round, we can take a flyer. We don't have to worry about the back. But this will be a great opportunity for Thayer Munford, if he can stay healthy, to work his way in. You've got a new coach coming in who's going to want to get his guys on the field. So unless you're an established starter who's playing really well and still entering the prime of their career, new coaches generally come in and they'll start to clean house a little bit. And so if you're a fringe guy, or if you're a guy who's maybe, for lack of a better term, exceeded their useful life, maybe on the downside, they want to make sure that they can get their own folks in there and develop their own culture. Thayer Munford has an opportunity to be a part of that in Vegas. And so those were the 6 players drafted by Ohio State: 2 firsts, 2 thirds, a 5th, and a 7th. It's a little bit disappointing on the volume. And here's a couple other guys who I thought might have been able to slide in there. Haskell Gear, left early, big physical guy out of Vegas. You thought, okay, people talked about him potentially being a 1st rounder. I thought that was a bit of a stretch, but I thought he would fall somewhere late 2nd, probably early 3rd to 4th round. That's kind of where I saw his fall spot. Not the biggest tackle, but he's pretty explosive. battled an ankle injury all year. And that's one of the things, some of his film wasn't as great, and he didn't necessarily look quite as athletic as he has in the past, just due to the inability to explode, plant, and drive off of that leg. So that's a tough spot for him. But he's getting a chance to go to Tennessee. I brought this up. Tennessee, why is that important? Well, look at who their head coach is. Mike Vrabel's there. He understands what Larry Johnson produces, understands the guys, how they're trained, how they're developed, the toughness element from them. And so it's a friendly face, and they know that he's going to be a guy that should be able to contribute. He can give them some interior pass rush when he's healthy. So, excited to see what he's going to be able to go and do down there. I know it's probably not the ideal situation for him as far as him hoping to get drafted, but once you're in the league, draft position goes out the window. You get on the practice field. If you can play, they'll find a place for you. So Mike Vrabel will make sure he gives him opportunities to be able to succeed on getting a rotation down there in Tennessee. And then the last guy, running back, who was a third team All Big Ten as a freshman, an absolute beast physically, checks all the boxes when you look at his physique and linear speed and strength, has it all. Little stiff coming in and out of cuts, but Master Teague as an undrafted free agent as well to the Chicago Bears. So they've got a new coach coming in. They're going to want to get their culture guys in there. And Master Teague, elite human being, hard worker. Here's the pathway for him to get on the field. He's going to have to be great on special teams. He's going to have to be able to be on punt, run down on kickoff, be on a kickoff return team or punt return. He's going to have to be on 3 of the big 4. He has the straight line linear speed and strength to be able to do it. And then in doing that, they trust you there. Then he can potentially be that third running back where you would look at him and say, okay, we can throw him in on short yardage, goal line situations, maybe some 2-back. He's a big physical hammer that can absolutely bring it. So Master Teague brings that element to it. And I think that there's a place for him. New coach, like I said, coming in with the Bears, new culture. They're going to want good dudes, get it to the team to be young, to get their cap situation in a good spot, and guys who are going to show up and work. And Master Teague checks those boxes. And he's an elite athlete. And so this is another great opportunity. I would be shocked if both of those guys didn't make a 53-man roster as free agents, that being Haskell Garrett and Master Teague the third. And so that kind of rounds up the guys who were drafted, and then a couple of the high-end free agent guys who I think have a really legitimate chance to ultimately make one of the squad. So excited about that. Disappointed only 6, but 2 first-rounders. Only 4 schools had multiple first-round picks: Bama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. And Georgia setting a record with 15 players drafted, breaking LSU and Ohio State's mark with 14. So a little disappointing there. So Bucks got to do better and load up and hopefully have a huge draft, which I'm sure they will next year if you look at all the guys that will be eligible, including their quarterback, CJ Stroud. So with that being said, that is your draft day edition or draft weekend edition of Carps Corner. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, anything you want to know, feel free to ask me, and I'll do my very best to answer it for you. So thank you for helping me to grow this, and talk with you soon.